I do still get a lot of questions about overcoming fear and building confidence. So I thought we'd come at this conversation with someone who has done this in the larger multifamily area. And of course, my experience is in residential single families through fourplexes, at least in the beginning. And I thought we could just talk to the new investors. Maybe at this point you have an interest, you have an itch that you are scratching, but you also have all kinds of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I thought Jonathan and I would talk about how do you overcome that. Jonathan, how you doing, man? What say you? Where do you start when you're a new investor? You got the itch, but you also have all of these fears in your head.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say this is a really great question and an important question. And I just like right off the bat, I want to tell people you never overcome the fear, right? The fear will always be there. And it doesn't, the process gets easier. You start feeling more confident in your ability, but the fear never goes away because you always fear you're going to make a mistake. You fear you've missed something. You fear, I mean, I know you don't raise investor money, but like I'm always fearful I won't be able to raise the money, right? What happens because it's happened to me before. Like I've had a great deal, put up the deposit myself and couldn't raise the money and like lost some of the deposit. So the fear is always there. And the fear, even I'll tell you, every time I hit send on an LOI, my very first thought is, did I offer too much? Right. And every time I close, my first thought is, did I just do something really stupid? Right. So these fears never go away. So the real key is how you manage the fears. And I think that comes down to learning and preparation. You have to, you really got to focus on mastering your task, mastering your skill set. If you're doing single family homes, and you have to really understand the comps, like really dig in and understand them. If you do what I do, and you need to understand underwriting, you need to understand, again, well, the comps too, and you need to understand the market, like really dig into those things. And I think the more you learn, the better you'll get at it. And you just, it's kind of like you always see those movies about like, guys on D-Day, and their sergeant's always like, remember your training and you'll be okay. It's kind of like that. Like, just remember your training. There's also, I know that people get stuck in analysis paralysis. At some point you do have to pull the trigger and just do something, and just be prepared for the fact that this, maybe you are making a mistake, but also take the attitude that like, if you do make a mistake, you're going to figure out how to correct it. It's pretty rare, I'd say, in real estate that you make a mistake that can't be corrected. The only time that really happens is if you really are just like, you adopt this belief that real estate can't lose. You don't do your due diligence. You do stupid stuff. Then that's where you can get sideways. But as long as you're taking a conservative approach, you're drilling down on the data, and you check all the boxes on your checklist, the chances are it's going to be okay. Will it be a home run every time? No. Could it be a single? Could it be a double? Could it be like an infield single that you barely beat out? Like, yeah, it could be, but that's a win, right? So, yeah.
It's funny when I think about this question, a lot of things come to mind, because again, it's sometimes it's hard for guys like you and I to remember what it was like to be a newbie, right, before we actually had anything. And when I go back and I start thinking about that, and more specifically think about what I got wrong and what really slowed me down, at least in my case, I kept all of those fears and uncertainties and doubts internal, right? Which meant I was just beating myself up thinking about them, where I should have went out and actively found a community or a group that was doing what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Right. And that way you can kind of learn by osmosis. You could ask the questions. You could see that other people have similar or different fears. There's just something about being in the room with other people that are doing what you want to do. When I trained for a marathon, I got around other people who had run marathons and picked their brain. And now that I'm on this transformation of my body this year, it's getting around people that have done that or are on the same journey. Because again, the thing that I am particularly weak at, but getting better, is I always thought I had to do it alone, right?
Yeah.
It was just how I was wired, right? I only can trust me. But now it's like, man, I got to get in other rooms with other people doing the same things just so I don't feel like I'm a unicorn, right? There are hundreds, if not thousands of people doing what you want to do. Go get in those rooms.
Yeah. I mean, I suffer from that too. I mean, I think that's a very common thing for entrepreneurs is thinking that you have to do it all alone. And like, there's this idea of like the heroic entrepreneur who starts $1 billion company, in their mom's basement or whatever, right? In the dark, they don't even have light bulbs, and it's like that's just not how it works. Like, when you see really successful people, it is really unusual that they did it on their own. Maybe they're the face of the company, maybe they're the one who's kind of in the spotlight, but they did not accomplish that by themselves. And for you, one great thing, not just like getting in a room and talking to other people, that's a great first step, but partner with other people. Find someone who has done it before and say, hey, look, I'll cut you in on my deal for nothing other than just being there to guide me in the right direction and make sure I'm not screwing it up. Right. And, or pay them as a consultant if you can't find anybody just to mentor you. And listen, I would like to point out one thing, like there is, so folks like you and I all the time probably get these requests like, will you mentor me? Right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, just because we're out there, we're talking about the stuff where obviously we know something about it, and people want to, they're like, oh, I heard somewhere I need a mentor and I want Jonathan to mentor me.
Yeah.
The problem is that mentorship relationships really grow out like organically, right? You can't just be like, hey, I want you to mentor me. Usually people who like want to take a shortcut like that, and you and I both have probably experienced this. I know I have. Usually people want to take a shortcut like that are people who will flake out.
Oh,
right?
For sure. I call them shooting stars. They're
exactly
here for a moment and gone.
Yeah. I mean, they're gung-ho. And then the minute that something gets a little hard, like they're out and they're on to the next thing. Right. And whatever the next thing, the next easy money thing that's out there, that's going to be what they go for. A real mentorship relationship is going to come out of like going to that meetup, every day for 6 months or a year, developing relationships, having somebody be like, you know what, this is a smart, eager young person who has stick-to-itiveness, and I think there's someone who I want to take under my wing and show them, like that. Yeah. That's how mentorship happens. And the only way you're going to find something like that is if you show up. So go to those meetings, get in those rooms, talk to people, be curious. Listen, it is also to ask questions like that, and actually here's the secret, right? The people that I've wound up mentoring, like organically, I mean, obviously I have like paid programs, but every once in a while somebody pops up where they just like, we just strike it up, click and whatever. They're usually people who just like ask me a lot of questions, but in a natural way. Right. And where it was kind of like, they gave me the opportunity to like be smart and show off and feel good about myself. Like I know what I'm talking about. Right. And like, it's always good to ask questions. Like people they like to share what they know, and they've been there before. They remember when they had those same questions. And what you need to do though, is you need to listen to what they say, because I'm sure you've dealt with this too. Like you get somebody who's like a know-it-all who knows nothing. Right. Yep. They're not interested in learning. They're just interested in like being right. And if you tell them like, and someone brings you I mean, I've had this happen to me many times. Someone brings me a deal, and what they don't want is for me to give them my honest opinion. What they want is for me to validate their idea. And usually their idea is really dumb. Yeah. And if I tell them, and of course I have a little tact, so I don't say this is really stupid, but I will point out some issues with it. And all that happens is they get pissed off.
Yeah.
And I'm the bad guy.
You burst their bubble and they're all upset when you were just saving them. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably saved them a lot of, if not money, a lot of effort and time, and they don't like to hear it. So, be curious, be open-minded, be teachable, be coachable, ask lots of questions,
Yeah.
don't BS, be open about what you don't know, and just be a sponge. And if you're someone like that, then that's the kind of person who will attract mentors to them.
Yeah. The next thing I think about when I was, going back to the beginning and you want to get a rental or you want to be, buy an apartment building, is I think a lot of people recognize they're at step A, and they see the acquisition as step Z, and they're just overwhelmed by all the letters in between. And, the sooner the sooner you understand, and I got this from the great Jason Pritchard, a buddy of mine. He's like, you just got to identify what step B is.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you got to do, is get clear on what step B is, right? A to B, document, say it out loud, and then work on understanding step B. It's not about Z. It won't be about Z for months, right? It's about B. And I think a lot of people get that wrong. They're fixated on the closing, which is a nice event, but unless you do the homework and you've mapped out A to Z, that closing could injure you, right? If you do the wrong thing.
Yeah. And I think listen, this is part of the problem of being an adult, right? Like, you're used to being good at stuff, and you don't realize it took you years and years and years to get to be good at stuff, and you're always comparing yourself to the ideal and not to like where you are, where you came from, or even what the next step is. It's always like, I'm not as good as this guy who has X. Oh, by the way, it took him like 20 years to get there. Right. You're gonna like make yourself crazy if you keep on comparing yourself to people who are way ahead of you. You can learn from those people, and that can be like an aspiration. But if you compare yourself to them, you're just going to quit because you'll get too depressed. And I think it's really important also to measure your progress backwards and not forwards. And what I mean by that is, this is not the easiest thing to do in the world. Even I still struggle with this, but I try to do this where I try to think about the progress I've made rather than the gap between where I am now and where I wish I were.
Interesting. Yes.
It's proven, like, psychologically, to make you feel better when you think about, okay, I'm right. If you're like a D, right? If you're looking at Z, you're like, man, I'm only a D. If you're looking back at A, you're like, man, I made it to D, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and the next step is E, right? And you're like, so that's the way that you should be looking at things. If you want to read a great book on this, there's a book called The Gap and the Gain, which is a Dan Sullivan book.
Gap and the Gain. I've read it. Yeah, it's a good
great book. And it's one of those books that's worth rereading every once in a while, just to kind of like refresh yourself about this. But a lot of journals also take this approach, like the Michael Hyatt journals, the full focus journals, which I use. It's really kind of based on that principle. Like, you record a win every day. You record your wins for last week. You record your wins for last quarter. And it's just like trying to look back on what you've accomplished rather than think like, oh man, I had 100 things on my to-do list. I only got 10 of them done. I left 90 undone. The healthy thing to do is like, I got 10. I got 10. Right. So, I think that approach can really help you as a new investor. So your wins can be, you learned something. Right.
Yeah.
Your wins can be
you met somebody.
You met somebody. You underwrote a deal. You made an offer on a deal.
Right.
Like, all those things are wins. They're all part of the process. You have to go through it.
Yeah. The other thing I think about where I see newbies kind of go sideways or wonky is they're not focused, which is really weird. Right. And it's back to something you brought up earlier, right? They try something, it doesn't work. They're gone tomorrow off to the next new shiny object. And I see that a lot in real estate. People are just chasing the next hot thing. And, you just gotta figure out what your thing is. And if that's step A or step B, so be it, but figure it out, because if you become elite at it, you can get rich. Real estate's a game that pays you for being elite, right? You want to go do boutique hotels? Great. You want to go do burrs? Great. You want to go do sub 2? Great. Don't try to do all three of those. You'll lose money and go nowhere.
Yeah. Just focus on one thing and get really good at it. And if you do that, the payoff will
it compounds, just
be there. Yeah. And so I learned something really interesting. I mean, it wasn't like I learned it, but I heard something that really resonated with me very recently. So, as you guys know, I'm like really trying to build up my school group. And by the way, it's coming. Free tier is coming soon. keep an eye out. But so I've been really digging deep into school, and one of the big sort of people on school has what he calls the one source rule. And what he means by the one source rule is only listen to one person about how to build your school group, right? He said they all work. Everybody who's out there who's built a big school group has a system, and they all work. If you follow one of them, you will succeed. If you try to follow all of them, you will get nowhere, right? And so think about that in real estate too. Like, follow the one source rule. Listen to one person, right? But don't do what I think a lot of people do, and I've done this in the past too, where it's like you're not getting an immediate result, so you switch. So someone else comes along with a good thing, and you're like, "Oh, that sounds great. I'll try that." But you don't do that long enough to get a result either, and then you switch to something else. I mean, that really is what the shiny object syndrome is in practice, and you have to avoid that. You have to just pick a lane, pick an asset class, pick a market, pick a niche, drill down on that, get really good at it. Just keep on doubling down on that. And only after you really master that and like you can run it on autopilot, do you think about like the next thing. Or if you really hit a dead end, but you've really like you have really put the time in to master that thing, that's when you switch. But then you switch to one thing. You don't like it's not like you do this and that, or you do these three things. Just focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about this is one of the things that I've seen in my life. This is even beyond real estate. Back when I was selling software and creating products from nothing, is document what you're afraid of. Like, write it down, right? Write it down. Don't just keep it in your head. Write it down. Put it out in the universe. Again, this goes back to meeting people and documenting. It is so empowering or freeing to write down what the fear is, because once it's kind of named, at least in my world, I can go find the answer. Right. I think it's important to write it down.
I think writing it down is a great tip. And I'll push that a little further. Write it down and write out like what's the worst thing that could possibly happen. Right.
Agreed.
And you'll find that, yeah, you can imagine like all these crazy scenarios where the worst case happens. But like, A, what are the chances of that worst case happening? Right. You're going to find like, well, this is really very, very small chance. And B, ask yourself, well, if the worst case happens, am I going to survive? Like, am I going to die? And the answer to that is no, which means like, hey, look, yeah, so you bought a house, you bought your first house. It really went sideways. You lost money. Did you die? Was it the end of the world?
Did you die is a great question. Yeah.
Right. And like, and if you, as long as you didn't die, like, you know, did you die? The answer is no, then you're fine. Right.
You're fine. Exactly.
You can live with it, and you literally live to fight another day.
Yeah. You get better. You get stronger. Yeah.
Yeah. And and in combination with writing out your fears, I think it's also really helpful to write out what your wants are. Like what is your like dream scenario? Not I'm not meaning to like contradict myself and say like don't compare yourself to others. Like, you're not comparing yourself to others in that. You're comparing yourself to where you want to be in the future. That's different, right? And write out that dream scenario. Some people say write it out every day, you know, and the contrast between the two is like the dream scenario is going to be the motivation. Writing out the fears will overcome the obstacle, right? It'll help you keep going so you don't get stuck on the fears. And I think doing those two things together, along with like looking back at your progress backwards rather than forwards, like document your wins, right? Those are all things that can help you build that confidence muscle, right? So that you can just move forward.
I agree. Folks, at the end of the day, something you should take from this conversation is we all have it. Fear is real. Uncertainty is, doubt is real. Jonathan and I have both been through it. Jonathan and I both experience it still, but there are ways to do it. The big one for me is write it down, get in the right communities. Don't do it alone. That was a huge mistake of mine. Jonathan, where can people find you?
Well, listen, speaking of communities, school is imminent. So you can come to school, school.com/AIC. That will have a free tier soon. You always can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can just email me at jonathan@apartmentinvestorsclub.com.
Thank you so much. Take care.